Welcome everyone to Unscripted Coding. Today we are going to be talking about stable diffusion again. And for those of you who follow this channel, we have a couple videos from a few weeks back in which we talked about setting up stable diffusion in a couple different ways. The goal of that is, of course, to have your own UI so you can look at something like this. And what we're going to talk about today in this video is what some of these settings are. Some of it is still mystery and some of it will always remain a mystery, but we're going to try generating some images. But let's go back first. Why do I keep doing these videos? Well, stable diffusion, I think, is going to be in the public domain for a long time. It's going to change things. It is the text to image prompt. You ask it for something like, I have no clue what that is, but let's say a portrait of a knight in shining armor. You're gonna get an AI to draw out that image and spit it out. So it's really critically important, and we're seeing apps like Lensa just starting to go viral because it's a really powerful idea that we don't need artists, we don't need designers if we just want to put together, a quick PowerPoint. It's also important because there seems to be a lot of backlash coming out right now. Now, I don't know where I stand here, but these AI are created through the use of well-drawn, well-designed images. So it went through a lot of artists and their images, whether it's, the classical masters or current artists today on ArtStation or other platforms. So in some sense, people see it as splicing these images together and using AI to take what artists have created and creating something new. And of course, it does come down to money because you're not paying the artists in that way anymore. I don't know where I land on this. This is a technicality because you're splicing it up and you're running it through all these algorithms. It's not like I'm just taking a collage of these images. And where do you draw the line? Who knows? But whatever comes out is going to be true for all of the other AI tools we talked about as well. If I ask GPT-3 to create a script, it has read, I don't know, Harry Potter and spliced it up, and presumably there might be a little tiny piece of it in my new script. Is that the same problem? Is that the same battle? Anyways, not important. We're just here to talk about the tech. And the amazing thing about stable diffusion is that the pace of progress is pretty quick. In those previous videos, I think we were talking about stable diffusion 1.4 and 1.5. Now we're up at 2.1. To catch you up to speed, 2.0 was a pretty big leap. It's starting to recognize depth. In 1.4 and 1.5, if you asked for a person standing in an office, it might compose it properly, but also possible is that it just has a picture of a person and then the background of the office in the back, and the person might be floating in midair. He might be too big or too small. He might be clashing with the chair. So Stable Diffusion 2.0 is attempting to solve some of that by putting in some knowledge of the depth inside an image, so that there is some semblance of perspective. Not perfect, and none of this is, but the pace of it is pretty amazing. These are just a couple weeks apart every time, and I suspect that in 6 months' time, we're going to have something much cooler and hopefully something that runs on a lot more equipment. The other thing I wanted to mention is, of course, you can go back and look at the videos to see how we set this up. This is Automatic1111, that's 4 ones. They provided a graphical user interface that we can work with. But what I wanted to mention is this isn't available to everyone. Generating these images is pretty intensive, so you need a very good graphics card. I'm going to be shutting my video off and on so that you don't, wait 1 minute, 2 minutes while it generates each image. And alternatively, if you do run it on the cloud instead, those do get expensive as well. You're easily going to run $1, $5, $10. It balloons very, very quickly in a way that text is much harder to get to those numbers. Okay, so you can see here I have my Hello Robot. Today we are really just going to look at this text to image tab. There are other tabs as well. I'm just going to go through quickly as well. Image to image, generally you take one image and transform it to another one. One of the ways you do it is you mask certain areas. So for example, I don't like this chest plate here. I'd rather it be green. I might take it out and add some changes to a prompt so it knows this little area is what I want to change. In painting is the same thing, just trying to edit the image along the way. We have extras. There are a bunch of different scripts, and I'm thinking it's actually down here as well, that you can install. So if you go extensions, you can install all sorts of different scripts to add functionality. But some of the most common ones is upscaling. So generally speaking, because it's so demanding, you are creating very small images. So in my case, I'm creating 768 by 768 resolution images. So even if I click into this, it's not the largest image in the world. You might want just a massive canvas to blow up and create a poster out of. Very difficult to do because you need so much time or computing power to make it happen. So the easier way is to generate 768 by 768 and then scale it up, 4 times at a time. So 768 times 4 is, roughly 3000 by 3000 pixel. It'll try and keep the same image and use AI to smooth out all of those, jaggedy edges. And then when 3000 by 3000 isn't enough, you do it again. You could try different upscalers, and you can upscale it once with one and another one. Lots of trial and error is going to be the theme of this particular video. You may see some amazing images on the internet. I have certainly generated some amazing images on Stable Diffusion, but I have generated so much garbage as well. So something they're not telling you is they've done 100, 200 photos to find a really excellent one. There's a bunch of different other things, but the other one I wanted to mention quickly is Dream Booth. I am just starting to play around with that, so I'm not even going to click into it. But this is where, if you've heard of Lensa, this is the tool they're using in the back. Dream Booth essentially allows you to take 10, 20 selfies of yourself and turn that into a style. So every time I say Anson, I'm going to see my face, or Unscripted Coding, or some other tagline. I might use some weird nonsensical string like AB12756, whatever. And when I use it in a prompt, it's going to know that this is the face it wants. And then you can spit it out in, concept art style, realistic painting, anime, cartoon, vector image, blah, 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 blah. Haven't played around with it enough. I have not even had one successful image yet, so clearly I'm not doing something right. Let's not get into that. And then there's settings and extensions. But again, the focus is right here. When I did Hello Robot here, this is where you have a number of prompts, and I am going to just take a prompt from the side here. and type this out. A lush forest with fairies and tree houses. Detailed matte painting by concept art. Let's see. Bright colors, green tinge, soft light atmosphere. Unreal Engine 8K light effect RTX on smooth. Okay, so what have I done here? Well, generally speaking, when we talk about this text to image, the first thing you're thinking of is this first prompt here. And this is important. That's a description of your image. You want something that is that's accurate to what you describe. So you need that. But the next bit is a series of details that tell the AI what to think and how to draw. So in this case, a couple of things here. Matte painting by WLOP. I don't know if you're supposed to pronounce that. I've seen his art on ArtStation and other places here and there. He's a really good artist. You should Google him up and maybe purchase his prints. But that way you get a sense of what style of art you're looking for. You might talk about some of the masters. I don't know, Michelangelo or is that even the actual name? Rembrandt, whoever else. Or you might talk about, in the style of Simpsons cartoon or anime or something else. Concept art, same thing. I like putting in visible brush strokes as well to really highlight that painting type of look. So I'm going for a very specific piece of look. Then you want to add a bit of discussion about what you want to see. Now, you don't have to do this and you can let it be a mystery, but I wanted it fairly bright. It's a forest, so I want that green tinge. I'm looking for that kind of fantasy look as well, so you have soft light atmosphere. Those kind of give you the sense. Other people will talk about sun flare, whether the light is coming from the left, right, top, bottom. You want to give the AI just a bit of detail so that you get the image you're imagining. The other thing that does come up quite a bit is like detailed. That's another cue. I see 8K, Unreal Engine. It's kind of weird. I saw this a lot and I realized it does have a huge effect on your painting. But the idea here is you're generating a 768 by 768 image. Like, it's a very tiny, basically, barely a web standard today. And so you're going to have a very basic image here. The idea of 8K is it's trying to create that look, even though you're a tiny image. So you might have like houses crammed really small, or fairies, lots of little details, and they may just be 2 or 3 pixels large along the way. But that's the idea. You're cramming more into a painting because it thinks it's an 8K, or rather it's looking at images that generally have been 8K. RTX on, smooth, detailed, those, again, talk to the look that you're looking for. Now, you can have negative prompts as well. So this is where you want to go the opposite. What you don't want to see. So I want to say warm colors here. And I might want to say people, machines. Those things I don't want to see in this fantasy forest image of mine in my head. And you don't need a whole lot. Some people might put, certain elements specifically missing. So what's in a forest? Very oddly, no flowers or no people, no structures. Okay. Now, the other thing that's useful about these prompts is that you can emphasize certain things. So in this case, let's say I want bright colors here. If you put them in brackets, they are emphasized, and you can actually do like double brackets, multiple brackets as well to really say this is important. And I might say lush forest is important, and I like tree houses important. Okay, and that will tell the prompt that this is more important. Okay, I'm going to generate this image first, and then we can go over these right after. And we have an image. And this looks pretty cool here, I think. It's not exactly what I was imagining. I was hoping for more tight-knit, multiple tree houses, but certainly makes sense based on what I've asked for. Okay, so what are all these other options? And this is something where you're going to play around with a lot. I'm going to go down through the easy ones first. Width and height, obviously you set it up as you like. I have downloaded the Stable Diffusion 768 version. That is geared for generating images that are 768 by 768. There's a 512 by 512 version that most people are currently using. But if you can generate however large you want, and it'll do a fine job. But if I, for example, try 1472 by 1472, my computer is just gonna flat out stop working. In fact, just to generate this image, I had to turn off my webcam, turn off the stream, because it really brings your computer, at least my computer, to its knees. So you want it purely focused here. I did get a new graphics card recently, so it generates pretty fast if you're sticking at 768 by 768. Maybe like 20-30 seconds if you have everything shut off, ready to go. The next one, other obvious one I want to go through first, is batch count. So as I said, this is a trial and error, and if I generate this once, twice, 10, 100 times, you're gonna see 100 different images. The AI does it fresh every time, and maybe some of them will look similar, and if you're very good with your prompt and very detailed, it might have something very specific. But generally speaking, people who are posting gorgeous images on Instagram or ArtStation are doing it partly because they're doing a batch of 40 images at once, or 100 images, so that you get to pick the best one. And then, of course, a batch of 100, but you're doing like 3 batches or 10 batches or 8 batches. You're going to see a lot of different results, and you get to pick what really matched your vision and what you thought of. So for me, when I generate, not for this particular video, but when I try and generate an image, I'm looking at maybe like 10 or 20 photos. I'm doing this for fun, so I just have an image in my head and I like to see it. So 10, 20, usually I get to see one that I'm relatively happy about. Okay, now, let's talk about this top chunk here. Sampling steps basically says how many times are you asking the AI to really go through the image. If you've seen other AI, what they do is they do passes over, say, a text or an image here, and they check it over and over and start modifying it. So if you do one single step here, it's going to be a random, checkerboard box of colors. It's trying to get its idea right. And then it's going to move some of those pixels and start framing things together. And so over the course of, 5 or 6 steps, it's starting to get the general idea. It turned, a random collection of pixels into maybe a couple blobs that are starting to be brown and then green, and they're going to think this is a tree, this is a what do I call it, tree house. And then by 12, 13, it's starting to have a really good idea. The default value is 20, and I think that is all right. When you get to 20, you generally have a coherent image. That's how many steps it takes to get to a coherent image. But between 20 to 50, I think it's really starting to get to those details where I want to see, visible brush strokes or painting. It's starting to really key in on those details and going, how do I change little bits here and there? And it's just iterating over and over. And so when you get, to 150, it's getting really, I'm not sure there's a ton of value unless you're certain that is a perfect prompt and perfect image. When you get from 20 to 50, I definitely think there is polishing of the image. But when you go from 50 to 150, I feel like it's just moving things a little bit for the sake of moving it. Your mileage may vary depending on your image, but generally I like 50. I think it comes out with a really polished image every single time. Sampling method. I've been meaning to try this out, and if you go online, lots of people try different sampling methods and talk about what effect they have on the painting. Generally speaking, I don't think it really makes a difference. There is a difference, but the idea is how does it look at that image and reevaluate it between each of those steps. And so whether it starts grouping the blobs together or it starts spreading them apart, and how does it look and evaluate at it. When you're doing 50 steps, I just don't think there is a huge difference. But when you do sampling, you're going to see other people swear by certain ones and talk about how some of them are slightly better if you're looking for portrait versus concept, landscape. You want to pick one that is good. From there, we have other options as well. These ones over here are post-processing, basically. Restoring faces, pretty obvious. Depending on the sampling method, depending on your steps, and if you have actual, a portrait of a person or an individual named in your prompt, you're gonna have faces. Some of them might be good, especially if you're doing like 150 steps. But if you're doing 100, or if you're doing something low, like 20 steps, some of them turn out a little funky. So the idea is when you click Restore Faces, it's going to detect faces within your image, and it's going to just train that part and recognize that it's a face and fix up the face. Pretty important for certain art, of course. High res fix and tiling, this one produces an image that can be tiled, so it tries to fix the edges so that you can kind of tile it out. High res fix uses a two-step process to partially create an image at a smaller resolution. I'm not really sure what this does, but I think it just sets it up so that when you go image to image and you blow it up 4 times larger, it just sets it up to be better for that. Going down, CFG scale, I don't mess with this, and I think the general advice is to keep it at 7. But the idea is if you have something fairly low, like 1, it's going to take this prompt as a general suggestion. It doesn't have to follow it too closely. It's just maybe going to think, for us, maybe we're not going to do tree houses. If you have a CFG scale that's very high, it's going to really penalize. It's going to say we have to check all of these things off. Try 7. I think for the most part you're gonna get what you asked for. I guess in this case I don't see any fairies, so a higher CFG scale might have forced it to put a fairy here or somewhere in the image. Okay, I think that covers everything. Seed is just how you start generating that random start. Not gonna play around too much with it, but if any of you guys have ever done, a random number generator, the seed is kind of where you start. And if people start with the same seed, you can get similar results. Versus if you want to be truly random, you just pick a random seed. I think the same thing is true with these images. If you start with the same seed, you get similar random numbers. You're never going to generate the same image, I don't think. Not in a million years, but you might get similar results as opposed to starting with a different random number. There are extras to change your seed, but more importantly, you have different scripts as well. This is where you get your extensions to do all sorts of things, to focus on faces, to make changes like these tiling, high-res fix. These are the type of scripts that you might add onto it. Okay, so I've done a lot of talking. I'm just going to generate one last image here, but let me see if I can find a good script. And I think we're going to talk about people this time. So I'm going to say portrait of a young aristocrat in medieval France. Okay, let's see how this looks. And we have our final steps here. I have no clue if this is actually how aristocrats looked like in medieval France. It seems to jive about right. I realized I didn't actually do the restore faces, so that probably would have fixed some of the slightly odd ones, although they're really not too bad as is. But let's cycle through them right now. They do have that painting look. This face needs to be fixed very much so. But yeah, visible brush strokes. It looks pretty good. And see what I mean by you want to generate massive batches. In this case, some of these don't look quite right. This one. And I've noticed some of their eyes aren't quite right. It might be a great starting place if you're just doing a thumbnail or you want to paint over it, but when you generate 10 of them, you'll figure out, I think this one probably turned out the best right here. And you get to keep playing around with it. So, I hope you enjoyed this. Do have fun. Try and install Stable Diffusion if you can, or get some cloud service, because I think there's a lot of fun to be had. I'll see you guys next week in our next video. Thanks for watching.